During that time, that was when Mousing Around came out, Pinbot. These were games that revolutionized the actual gameplay.
Did pinball die off again after that?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever been on a website for a very specific reason? Then you click on a hyperlink, and then another. Ooh, look, suggested videos. Next thing you know, you spent hours researching a super obscure topic. Your mind has transcended planes. You are now an expert. So come on the show and tell us about it. Hello and welcome to Hyperlink. I'm your host, Dominic Hure, and today we're talking to James Kirchner, an
Hello.
expert on pinball.
The things in the arcades that people don't play.
Yes. How did pinball start?
Okay, so pinball got its start as gambling games. So originally, these were just wooden boxes with usually nails in them and holes bored through. And you just plunged the ball from the side or dropped it from the top, and it would try to land. You would try to land it into one of the cups. There was no interaction between the person and the game. But in 1947, Gottlieb created Humpty Dumpty. So Humpty Dumpty was the first of that kind of line of games with flippers. So originally in these older games, they were electromechanical machines. So if you hit a switch on the board, it would send a signal to a reel, a big motor in the center of the inside of the box. And that would spin, and on the side there would be little metal pieces that would hit switches, and then those switches would send electrical signals to big boards of switches that would just kind of adjust themselves along their little path. In '76, Williams produced Hot Tip. So Hot Tip was the first pinball game that had a computer. Basically condensed all of these switches and more complex machinery down into a microchip. The 70s, during this solid state transition area, that was like the golden age, the original golden age of pinball. That's when everything was first getting started, and people and machines were just flying off of the production.
What was the next kind of wave of pinball?
Okay, so the next wave of pinball was the 80s. So the big problem that happened for pinball manufacturers was that video games started pushing the bigger games out. In '83, there was the Atari panic, the Atari crash, the video game crash of '83. So that affected the arcades, strangely enough, because this was in the home market. So arcades started closing left, right, and center. But that whole time kind of ended with the introduction of the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System. Nintendo made pinball games. So there was a pinball for NES. So that still, it kept the idea of pinball alive.
So then how did pinball come back after that?
So after that, System 11 came around. So System 11 was a redesign of the solid state System 7 that had been the standard for a long time. During that time, that was when Mousing Around came out, Pinbot. These were games that revolutionized the actual gameplay because these games were way more complex than anything the previous 5-6 years had given. But also during that time was the big Williams golden age. So this is when Medieval Madness, Attack from Mars, Monster Bash, Twilight Zone, Addams Family.
How was the technology different for this wave versus the other ones?
So a big reason is the DMD. So the DMD, or dot matrix display, replaced the alphanumeric kind of 7-segment display that games in the System 11 era had. And these games were also run by what's called the WPC, which is the Williams pinball controller, which is the system that came after System 11.
So did pinball die off again after that?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the 2000s, pinball started to fall out of the zeitgeist again. Video games got more and more advanced. Arcades wanted to buy those games instead of pinball machines. And then the games that were getting produced weren't all that great. Data East ended up being acquired by Sega. And then they were like, you know what? This sucks. So they sold their pinball division back to Gary Stern, who originally started Data East. So Stern goes, all right, well, I'm gonna start my own pinball company.
I like pinball.
Yeah, I like pinball. I want to keep doing this.
Yeah.
So all of my competitors are gone, basically. And in 2004, he restarted Stern. And then Metallica comes out. And Metallica really gets people going because that game is so good. And that brought a lot of eyes back onto pinball. And then from 2013 till now, Stern has just been putting out bangers left, right, and center, except for Ghostbusters, just bangers. So
how do you actually play pinball? Because it seems just for a noob looking at it,
yeah.
it's just like just to keep the ball from going down, and then everything else is just completely random and just kind of a fun things to bounce off of. But there's a strategy to it, right?
Mhm.
So like, how do you go about that? Okay.
So every game has a manual. 99% of them are online for free to go and look at. So if you come across a game that you've never played, it is my recommendation and a lot of other people's to kind of maybe check out the manual and just look at like just the gameplay and see what the progression is in the game. Like what are the goals in the game. In an earlier pin, like a early Williams or Stern game, the goal is pretty simple. Like in Magic, it's you spell magic. Like spelling magic means like there are lights on the board that say magic on them, or MAGIC, and then those lights have a corresponding target on the board, and you shoot the target to light the letter. And then when you light all of them, then you get a big score. Mm-hmm. Lighting is literally lighting up a light bulb
when you say
on the board.
Something on the board is lit. That's what you mean. Okay.
Yeah, so it's literally lighting up a thing on the board that corresponds to a point value. Okay. So if you hit that thing the light is attached to, then it awards that point value if it is lit.
And they can like tell stories in a way too.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
So in Batman 66 is a good example. Batman 66 is a great game if you really want to get to like the gameplay aspect of it, because it isn't just about points in that game. It's also about catching the villains, catching the bonus villains, going through the seasons of the TV show. You've got extra little like you drive the bat car. And you hit the spinner thing in the middle. You pick up the bat phone. So there's a bunch of other things that you can do in that game, just gameplay-wise, not focusing on points.
Can you tell me a little bit about like the community nowadays around pinball and like?
So the community in general of pinball in SoCal is pretty strong. The places where you can play pinball now are usually barcades. So these are arcade bars. Kind of combos, and then there's places like our place, Pinball Wizards, and Captions, which are just pinball places where you can just go in and you pay. For our setup is it's just one fee for like either an hour or you can pay all day, and you get free reign over our 25 games. A big part of the community is the tournaments. A place organizes their tournament for a weekend, and all the players from that area kind of come out, and then they put their money down for the pot, and then it's just you play all day and you play through the tournament, and then that's where people kind of come together, and that's how we bring new people in, is usually through the tournaments.
So where can I learn more about pinball and community and stuff now?
So there's a lot of good resources, mostly Facebook. So a lot of tournament organizers, a lot of places to play pinball post most of their stuff on Facebook or on their social medias. If you just search a pinball group on your Facebook, on your local Facebook, then you'll find a local group full of people that will be down to have tournaments and stuff like that, big or small. There's also a app called Pinball Maps. So Pinball Maps is a great resource because it tells you where all of the pinball machines, not just places to go and play pinball, just pinball machines in general. So if there's a bar with like 1 or 2 games, there's a round table down the street that has a 1 game and that's on there. So if you're just hankering for some pinball, you just go up on the app and be like, oh, this is where I'm at, where are all the pinball machines around me, and then it'll pop up.
Thank you so much for telling us about pinball today, James.
Yeah, thank you.
If you want to learn more about pinball, we're going to record a podcast about more pinball stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to be on all the podcasting platforms under Hyperlink by 22 West. And so check that out. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.